G'day, how are you guys? Appreciate those that are tuning in. I'll give everybody a few seconds to kind of join in. I think I'm a little bit early, but I've been having some troubles with my Facebook Live of recent, so I jumped in a little bit earlier just to make sure that this is working. How you guys going? Hope you're doing well, wherever you are in the world. Today's live is a little bit of an explanation for why and what I've been posting recently. And I felt like it probably deserved a little bit more of an open and honest conversation with you guys. Text and posts can be a little tricky sometimes to understand context or hear the tone even. So I wanted to do this so you and anyone else that's interested in what I have to say about these issues can hear my voice, can see my face, and yeah, you can just see it for what it is and why I'm doing what I'm doing. People from all over the world joining in. G'day from Florida, from the US. We've got Aussies watching. We've got Malaysians. It's fantastic to see you all. And this is definitely a global issue that we're talking about right now. It's affecting every bowler in the world. And I think when we start to make decisions that have such a huge reach in effect, if it doesn't feel right, doesn't look right, doesn't sound right, we need to ask a few of these questions that I feel like haven't been answered enough. And I'm going to, again, kind of explain a little bit in more detail and share with you from my perspective on how certain events had unfolded. I want to start by saying that one of the things that I'm reading is that Storm and Storm headquarters have generated some well-organized mass staff player rebellion and a coordinated Facebook posting attack, and that is not true. Storm have not asked me personally to do this or to post what I have posted. I've done this because I don't feel good about it. It doesn't make sense to me personally. There's been a lot of outcry for suing, and I don't think that's the right avenue either. I don't think that's good for our game. I don't think that's good for any company to be suing each other within our industry. And I just wanted to make that really clear that this is not something that I've been asked to do or made to do by my sponsors or by anyone. So we can kick right off into my objection to getting my bowling balls tested at the Masters and why it all felt a little bit funny. I was bowling the practice session, and during that session, I was in the middle of it, a USBC staff member came up to me and told me that I needed to bring my equipment to the testing room after I was finished bowling. I've done this many times before. I said, no problem. I think I cracked a joke or two about it, and that was it. So I was packing up my stuff after the practice session, getting my bowling balls ready to be taken to the testing room, and I'd overheard a couple of tour reps from different companies talking about how the surfaces of bowling balls were being changed in the testing room. And I had never heard that before when we have done any of our on-site testing. It was new, and I thought that was a bit odd because when I was told to go and bring my equipment back, I wasn't informed that there was going to be a change of surface or an additive added to it to even clean the ball. And I'd asked the tour reps, what was going on, and they said, well, we saw that there was some surface changes going on back there. So I took all of my gear, I went into the testing room, and there was obviously a black curtain there. And the gentleman who was doing the testing said, you can leave your bowling balls here on the ground. And I said, well, I would prefer if I could stay and watch. And before I could get my next sentence out, he stopped me and said, no, we aren't allowing anybody to watch the process. And I said, well, then I decline. He said, well, you're more than welcome to. It's a voluntary test. And that shocked me, because that was not how it was presented to me when asked to take my equipment back to the room. At that moment, another player had walked in behind me and had overheard that it was voluntary as well. And that shocked him. And he said, what do you mean it's voluntary? And the USBC staff member said, oh yeah, you don't have to do it if you don't want to. And he turned around and said, well, I don't want to do it. So he walked away, and then I made the comment that I thought this was really weird and it's wrong, that whatever's going on behind that curtain, that you won't allow us to watch our bowling balls be tested. And I was pretty cranky, and they wouldn't let me take a look there. I tried to take a look. I didn't see anything. Like, I literally, it was for maybe half a millisecond, tried to take a peek back there, but was asked to refrain, and so I did. And so I was pretty cranky, so I just left and thought this was really weird. And later that day, I was talking to a few other players, and I'd mentioned, hey, did you hear anything about these surface changes, or what's going on there? And one of the players had mentioned, I think my ball surface has changed. He said, I use this ball as a spare ball only. It's old, it's beat up, I never hit it, I never touch it, and when I noticed it, it was clean, and it had fresh rings on it, and it just didn't look the way that it was when I gave the ball for the testing. So, with that information, I was then called into USBC offices to essentially be given a fine for a post that I created the night before about showing what was happening and what was weird. But I hadn't spoken to any of the USBC staff at the time about the manipulation of ball covers, and I didn't feel comfortable just throwing an accusation out there without talking about it. And I was prepared to do something that week about it, but when handed my fine, I was led to believe that my involvement in the Masters could be interrupted if I were to continue what I was doing. During that conversation, I then said, is it true that there is surface changes to the bowling ball? I mean, I'm hearing 500 grit surfaces, I'm hearing rubbing alcohol, I'm hearing cleaners. Can you at least, shed some light on what is going on behind that? Because if that's the case, then the player ought to know before voluntarily giving his equipment to a USBC staff member to test. The staff member said he was unaware of Abralon pads being used, but was aware that there was cleaners. To my reply was, even still, that's wrong. You're touching our bowling balls the day of, or the day before, sorry, because it was the day before the major championship, the day before a major championship and after a practice session that we can no longer go practice with. So if we wanted to throw those balls again to see how they rolled, we couldn't. The next time we could would be for score. I asked him, what's the penalty if I go into the paddock, and even if I did use just an alcohol cleaner or another cleaner and just started cleaning my competitors' bowling balls without their knowledge, what would happen to me? I answered the question. I said I'd be disqualified. My reputation would be ruined, and it's not right. You're giving me this fine because I'm shedding bad light to the USBC, when in actual fact, if you think this is giving you bad light, then you need to change what you're doing, because I'm just showing people what is actually happening. And at the time when I made that post, I didn't even reference the cleaner, because I hadn't spoken to USBC about it, wasn't going to accuse ball manipulation of the surfaces. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that's all okay. As far as I'm concerned, if you need to run tests and you want to make them as accurate as you possibly can, and by doing that you need to have a standard ball surface to be able to run a test, because obviously all the players have their ball surfaces at different grits and different finishes, and as we've seen from recent content that the durometer tests are far from accurate, they are a range, no problem. But tell me you're going to do that, so then at least I know that something has been done to my equipment, and I can either, especially for a voluntary test, I can then choose, knowing all the information at hand, whether to give my bowling balls to the tester or not, knowing that their surfaces are going to be changed. So the conversation in the office was calm. We weren't mad at each other. Like I suppose I understood why they gave me the fine from a code of conduct. You know, it is at their discretion. It is subjective what they think is worthy of a fine or not. I did ask about an appeals process, and then I jokingly said, but wouldn't the same people who gave me the fine also be the same people who would be judging my appeal? And I kind of got a jokingly sheepish yeah. And I said, well then why would I appeal it if the same people are going to look at it? And then I was read the fine, and obviously there's a portion of that fine that says if I don't pay, I could be subject to disqualification of the event. So I paid the fine and I moved on. That day, we obviously hear that 6 bowling balls from Storm, including a previous ball in the Spectre, had failed due to the softness issue. And the very first thing I did was call Storm and said, hey, what happened? What is going on? This is huge news. And Storm were really shocked. They were saddened, and they were also really frustrated that this announcement was given 3 hours heads up to them of making the announcement, that there was no opportunity for Storm to be able to compile their data, compare each other's data with USBCs, to be able to, as we have come to find, show how variable the durometer readings can be. And then that got me thinking a lot about the USBC's testing and why their testing is a hard line on technology that is not precise. And I couldn't understand how the governing body could be so confirmed on their number with 0 variances, knowing how many variables there are when using a durometer. The second question I asked Storm directly after all of this was, I love this company very much, and if we are, being done wrong, I want to fight for us. However, I have to ask, are we doing something we shouldn't be doing to these bowling balls after we send them in for testing? And it was a very awkward thing to say, because I believe in Storm. We've been making bowling balls for a very long time. We've had 0 issues in the past. And I didn't feel comfortable asking it, but I wanted to ask it because if the answer was not what I was hoping, then there would have been a very different conversation with me and Storm. I was given an emphatic no. We do not change the way we make our bowling balls. We haven't changed the way that we make our bowling balls forever. Which made me feel a lot better. I believe them. And then I've been reading things, about, Storm wanting a competitive edge. And it made me scratch my head a little bit. And I started to think, well, if people are assuming that, or if people are saying that Storm is doing something they shouldn't be doing, I would ask the question, why? I've been on Storm staff for over 20 years. We have been the #1 ball manufacturer in the world since then. We sell bowling balls faster than we can make them. Our products tell the story themselves. They're phenomenal. And at a time in our game where ball softness is such a hot issue, where a lot of eyes are on the softness and hardness of bowling balls, to then manipulate a bowling ball to be soft isn't just wrong, it's stupid. And we aren't a stupid company. So knowing that we didn't have a motive to do any of this intentionally, to know that there was a confusion as to why these test scores were so hardlined, more conversations with players, more conversations with people within our industry, high-profile people in our industry. I just couldn't understand why the USBC's testing was so hardlined at these balls. We fast forward a few weeks, and we're now, a couple of weeks actually, and we're now at the Kegel Training Centre for the PBA playoffs. And Tom Clark calls all the players there at the playoffs and the tour reps into a meeting. And this was before we even threw a ball for the playoffs. And Tom explained why the PBA did not revoke the 6 bowling balls that the USBC had for national competitions. Tom explained the very first thing he wanted to do was give confidence to the players who were using these bowling balls in particular, that through his test and the PBA's test all season long, none of the bowling balls had failed the PBA's test. He then had a pretty extensive timeline on the softness issue and when it all started. And it goes back, to 2016-17, when we first had potential issues with bowling balls being soft. He explains the timeline, shares his data with the players. He reads out the durometer readings that the PBA has taken, told all of us we're more than welcome to have these results if we would like. And these results, using a variance, not one of them failed. Furthermore, and how I think the PBA governed this properly, was the rule to take out a bowling ball on the PBA tour is it must fail a test under 70D, when the rule now is 73. So that allows ball manufacturers up to 3 points in variance to how they test, where they test. And I thought that was a pretty fair number. When Tom shared all of the numbers of all of the bowling balls that have made a TV show for that season, the one thing that was obvious was Storm balls, Brunswick balls, Columbia balls, Ebonite balls, Motive balls. All of these reactive bowling balls were testing very similar numbers to the PBA's tests. No ball had failed, remember that. So then it got me to believe, well, if the PBA are noticing all of these bowling balls across an entire season that have made TV, and they're all comparable in the testness, in the test results from the PBA, then shouldn't the USBC's test also show a comparable number to other bowling balls. Which then leads me to that next question, is we don't get to see all of the data. Are there other bowling balls that are given the whip to the same extent as these 6, 7, if you include Spectre, of the 6 Storm balls? And if every single ball that has gone through USBC's testing and site testing has passed, wouldn't you want to share that information to strengthen your position? We haven't seen that, and I'm just wondering why. One of the comments that I read, I think it was in a frequently asked questions response from USBC, was the reason why the timing to eject these 6 bowling balls from national competition, which I think is also was incredibly bad, an incredibly bad decision to make, because you were really affecting not the elite pros, but you're affecting everybody else. And if you're here to govern the game, you've got to be thinking about your members and what's best for the members. And that timing was very poor. But it did get me to think that if the reason the announcement was made so hastily, in a really poor timed event of an announcement, and it was because they were made aware with their testing that these balls had failed. So they determined to properly govern, they would pull these balls immediately. But this also got me to think about, well, in the years gone past, there have been many bowling balls that have failed a softness test. And these bowling balls have not been pulled from competition so hastily. Why? I don't know. And I'm trying to understand why these 7 Storm bowling balls were treated differently. I truly believe that the USBC is not falsifying data. I don't believe that. I don't believe they're making their numbers up. What I'm trying to ask is why there is no variance on their testing when the maker of the durometer says this is not an exact science. Even in their laboratories, they offer a variance in their results because they know how flawed a durometer reading test can be. Why was a bowling ball that has been very, very public to have been accused of being soft not pulled from the market, or not explained why it wasn't pulled from the market? And then the other thing that has me a little bit confused is that it is my understanding that the USBC is now really focused on only the manufacturing hardness. And to me, that is not governing the game. That if your only concern of a bowling ball's softness is when it is made and not post-drilling, you are now opening up the possibility of people to cheat. People to purposefully soften their equipment, knowing that, well, if my ball is softer after the manufacturing stage, after I drill a few holes in the ball, that it's deemed to be, well, it's just over time, these bowling balls get softer, so you're good to go. I don't think that's right. I don't think we should have I think we should have a floor the PBA do, it's 70D. That's the floor. If you're below that, you cannot use that bowling ball anymore. It prevents players and manufacturers, for that matter, to manipulate bowling balls after manufacturing. That's the proper way to do it. So I didn't understand why the USBC is only concerned now with bowling balls at the manufacturing stage. These are just questions. You know, I don't think this is an easy thing to do. I'm not even suggesting that their decisions are not correct even. I'm just asking why these decisions were made so I can understand them better. If I understand them better and they make sense, then you don't hear a word out of me. But none of this makes any sense. So to kind of wrap this up a little bit, the reason why I didn't give my bowling balls at the testing facility was that I had heard that there was ball surface changes that the players were not made aware of. I was only confirmed by USBC staff that a cleaner or an alcohol was put on the ball prior to testing, which in my book is not okay. To not be telling the player that their bowling ball's surfaces, especially before a major championship, day one of a major championship has occurred, without telling the players that information. I also didn't think it was right to tell the players that, or to not tell the players that this was a voluntary test. One more point on that. I have heard that members of the USBC staff, in my post, I don't know what they're testing for, and I'm told that USBC staff have had meetings where they are saying, well, he absolutely knew. He knew what we were testing for. We were testing for softness, and we were also testing for the time period. In all of my years, when regarding with the USBC, any other time I have assumed something, I am told, do not assume. However, this time I'm supposed to assume. I knew exactly what they were doing. I was supposed to assume they were changing the surfaces of bowling balls before these testing. No, I'm not going to assume that on social media. I didn't even say anything about the manipulation of ball surfaces because, one, I felt a little threatened that I might not be able to play the Masters or finish out the Masters. And two, I didn't really have hard evidence until I spoke to the USBC staff that explained that, yes, we do use a cleaner. Which kind of leads me to another point. I know I was going to wrap this up a little bit, but the question of soft bowling balls and knowledge of soft bowling balls and having them pulled. At the 2020 US Open, there were bowling balls that were pulled from competition because they were deemed too soft. There were, I think, over 100 bowling balls, 113, if I'm correct, bowling balls tested at this year's Masters. We haven't seen any of that data. But if a bowling ball was soft and under 73D, under 70D as per the PBA's law, and they knew about it because they were testing them, should those bowling balls not be pulled? They have done it in the past. So why now? Why now not do that? And that was another question that I had was, there are bowling balls that we know through other testing, from the PBA's testing, that have heavily failed the 70D floor. And those balls were allowed to be used at the Masters, and those balls were tested the night before the Masters. So if USBC knew that there were certain balls that were heavily under 73D, and they've pulled bowling balls before from competition, am I to believe that none of the balls that have tested very low using the PBA's testing methods, that none of those bowling balls were soft? And if they were, why not tell the players? Why not say, hey, you can't use this bowling ball, it's too soft, we're doing testing here and we're noticing that this ball is considerably soft. So that was another question that I had. So the recap. These 6 bowling balls, 7 to include Spectre, have not been manipulated at all by Storm, and I believe that. We've seen a lot of content coming from Storm recently to defend themselves. And the USBC hasn't explained how their numbers are so precise as to allow for no variance for these particular balls. On top of that, with the PBA's testing and openness to share a lot of the content and results that they have collected over the season, and seeing that not just Storm bowling balls, but every bowling ball manufacturer was testing in a very similar range, all of which pass the PBA's test due to a variance allowance. Why is this not the case for USBC's testing? And are other competitors' bowling balls, going back from the original incident that we can think of in the last half a decade, why those bowling balls, if tested and recorded, are also below the spec level? Why was nothing done about it back then, and why is nothing done about them today? If those results are published in raw data files, and we can see that, yes, you know what, sorry Storm, every ball we've ever tested has passed the spec, whether from the manufacturing floor and spot test on site. You guys are wrong, you did something wrong. I'll get back on here. I will say I was wrong, we were wrong, we need to do better. It would only strengthen USBC's position, I believe, to release it all and show that no other bowling ball has failed. I just don't think that's the case based on what we're seeing on the PBA Tour. And again, let me be really clear about this softness and what's legal and what's not. I don't think 0.2 difference in softness is the reason for a ball being better or worse than another. I think 6 points, 10 points, which we've seen as low as 10 points difference, yeah, that's probably an indicator of performance changes. But 1 point or within a variance? No, I don't think we're seeing that. And I think that's what the PBA are alluding to, that we don't see there to be a performance issue within a variance. Stay within the variance and you're good. We all are, as far as I'm aware. And the ones that aren't are thrown out. So, that's my position. That's what went on at the Masters. That's how I feel about Storm bowling balls issue at the moment. I don't know what else to really say other than it's not easy for anyone. I'm not claiming that the USBC have an easy job. I don't envy them, but they are our governing body, and they are supposed to be governing this game to better it, to be working with their partners to make decisions on behalf of all of their members. And they will argue they're doing a good job, and I'm arguing for this issue, I don't think they did a good job. Now, in my post the other day, I mentioned that I didn't want all USBC staffers to feel like I'm painting them with the same brush, and I want to make that clear, I'm not. I have an issue with this very specific problem. There are many parts of the USBC that I think the staff are doing a great job, that the leaders in those areas are doing a great job. I am not calling for a disbandment of the USBC. I don't think that would benefit the game at all. However, I am calling for a different process, for more transparency, and to govern the game equally and fairly, which I think showing said data would allow us to feel that way, would allow us to at least see what they see. And if we see what they see, we might come to the same conclusions as they do and allow and understand that these decisions are correct and are for the betterment of the game. I'm not seeing that. I mean, I thought I was going to answer some of your questions, and there's so many. There are so many, which is thank you for asking them. I certainly do not have the answers for everything. I am not alluding to the fact that I know more. I'm just asking these questions that many players have been asking for a very long time, and more recently, trying to understand how decisions like this, which have affected millions of bowlers around the world, can be done so hastily, using science that is not precise. I just don't understand this. I'm almost certain, I haven't asked Storm this, but I'm pretty sure I know the answer, that the bowling balls that are in the marketplace right now, that have been sent back to Storm because of the banning of them, these bowling balls that Storm are retesting, not one of them is under the 73D spec mark, and they are being destroyed. Players' equipment is being destroyed for no reason. I don't understand that. If they're testing hard, if they're testing over the spec rate during competition, isn't that what matters most? If I put a ball on the shelf and never drill it, and it is 50D, who cares? No one's using it. It's on display. But if I put 3 holes in it, or 2 holes in my case, and throw it, I should be held accountable, or the person should be allowed to use a ball under spec. And here we have thousands of bowling balls, and Storm has released videos of showing them testing the ball and then breaking the ball. And it's just not how I would have done this. It's just not fair for the consumer. It's not fair to Storm. And I just want to understand why. Okay. Like I said, I thought I was going to answer some of your questions. It's going to be impossible to single out some. I am going to do my best to find questions that I think are relevant. Okay, this isn't quoted as an exact question, but there is one other question that they make a good point. And this is where I hesitate to answer because I was not in the room when the negotiations between USBC and Storm were made. But one of these questions was, how can it be legal and league, or how can the governing body allow a league to make a decision on such a huge issue, especially when league secretaries and presidents do not have the information or as much information as the headquarters of USBC have to make these decisions to allow or to not allow these bowling balls in leagues. So the question is, why ban them at a national level and why ban them and not ban them at a league-based level? And I believe their response was that they had noticed that on a house condition that softness does not have as greater effect as it does on sport conditions. And I just don't know if that sits well with me. The ball is either illegal or it's not. It's, you know, I'm either using something that's within spec or it's not, and my environment and what I'm playing with that equipment, I'm not entirely sure for our game that should matter. And that's probably a very debatable comment. Some people might think, well, in the league section, who cares? You know, let's just throw some strikes and have some fun, and it doesn't matter. I think because my brain is more wired from a competitive standpoint at a very high level, I feel like everyone should be using, or the USBC should be making decisions as a blanket, especially if they're going to make that decision, you know, to prevent players from using these equipment in the highest form of their competitions. It seems weird that the pros can't use something that amateurs could. And maybe it happens in other sports. I don't know, maybe does golf allow certain drivers in competitions at an amateur level but not a professional? It's possible. I don't know, but for our game, that doesn't sit right with me. So that's one question that I'm not entirely sold on the answer with. Again, the comments are flowing, so it's hard to stop them. But there was a comment, I'm just looking here. I can't find it anymore, but I noticed it. And it is also another question, is why is there not a third party independently testing bowling balls? And I think that's a really tough one. I think the USBC has been doing this for so long that when it all started, they were the only ones doing it, that it was a start. Why there isn't an independent third party that just says, you know what, we'll take care of all the testing spec stuff, governing bodies around the world, we will approve it, and then you can use it in your own areas, in your own countries, in your own zones. Someone had mentioned, why doesn't the PBA do it? I think all valid questions. I don't know. I don't think it would be easy to just overnight make that happen, but it does offer at least an opportunity for manufacturers to feel like they have a voice. Because I can tell you, Storm right now does not have a voice that USBC is willing to listen to. We have asked them repeatedly to come to our facility, to check our processes, to help us understand, and that hasn't happened. When sharing all of this content, we tried to share this content with USBC privately. It was ignored. So we don't have a voice, and I think a manufacturer should be able to defend their product. And there should be a way that if you feel like you have been unjustly ruled, you should be able to appeal it without feeling like you're fighting, like you're feeling like doing so will cause more chaos. So I think that needs to be looked at as well. Lots going on I think I want to end this by saying that I don't know how I want to end this. I don't feel good. I don't like to be in a position like this, but I do think it's a responsibility of players that if things don't feel right, to ask these questions. I feel really bad for Storm because I don't think we're doing anything wrong. We're certainly not doing anything intentionally wrong, and this is a company that has given so much to the game and has built a legacy of making the greatest bowling balls in the world, and now that legacy is tarnished based on not precise science and a decision that was very hard-lined. So I support Storm through this. I'm more than happy and willing if any USBC member, or maybe not member, that's a lot of you, person of authority at USBC wants to call me and discuss all this, I'm more than happy to listen, learn, understand, and if everything that I'm told makes sense, I'll happily come back here on Facebook Live and share with you guys what I now know to be different, and that I can accept it. Right now I can't. Alright guys, appreciate your time. Thank you for all your support. Thanks for watching. Whatever you're doing right now, I hope you're bowling. If you're not bowling, I hope you're thinking about bowling or thinking about going bowling. Till next time I see you guys. Peace. Appreciate you.